Another weird thing that comes to mind as I was meditating, just being quiet this morning in the silence, this story came to mind. So I'm going to try and remember as much of it as I can, but it was pretty wild. So the opening scene was, I guess, pilgrims is the best way to describe it. They each went to a person. So they were lined up and they were all receiving these sacks. And the person that I was following along didn't catch a name. The person gets to the front and the guy that's handing them out just kind of looks and says, "Everything you need is right here. And don't look in the sack." So just kind of like a foreboding kind of warning, kind of a look in his eye. And so the person takes their sack, but they're not as strong. I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, but not as strong as everyone else, so couldn't lift it up and was just kind of like pushing it or rolling it. And as time went on, time being weeks or months or years, I'm not sure, became stronger and could carry the sack. But, the travel was slow and they seemed to know where they needed to go. And then all of these people are picking up these sacks and they're all traveling at different rates, kind of in the same direction. Not everyone really following. It's not a strict line like an ant line, but they were all traveling generally in the same direction. And these marauders, that's the best way I can describe it, come by and they've got, swords or cutlasses or whatever they are. I'm not a weapons expert, but they're hooting and hollering. They're not carrying sacks, but they're slashing other people's sacks. And what you see is like some sand come out. And people were told not to look in the sacks. So they would close their eyes and become really angry, not look at the sacks, and, try to protect either each other or at least themselves from these marauders. And it was very tumultuous. A lot of anger, a lot of fear, and these marauders, some of them were laughing and some of them were very serious. It was very chaotic. But the person that I was with, their sack got, damaged. And so they're trying to figure out how do I travel with this without looking in it? How do I travel? How do I get where I need to go? Do I give up? And they were so angry that they tried to gather up what belonged with the sack and then hid it and followed this, I guess the footprint trails of the marauders, tracked them down. Didn't have a weapon, but, you could sense the anger and upset, and goes and tracks down the marauders and sneaks up on them and is kind of watching them. And they're sitting around a fire. Some of them look really serene, and others are, they just look like people hanging out near a fire. And the person that I'm following just gets really angry, notices the person that they think is the one that damaged the sack, and sneaks up behind them in the dark and attacks them. To the point, like, again, chaos. Like, people are laughing. There's a fire spreading through their camp, and they're putting it out. Some people they're just jovial, and others are, they're just nondescript, or there's a lot of chaotic walking about, running about. And the person that, retreats into the darkness and just to kind of watch the aftermath, to kind of revel in, I got him back. And then goes back to their sack to try and figure things out, because they still want to get to the next way station. I don't know. So they get a bright idea and take off their jeans, take pants, jeans, whatever, ties knots at the bottom of the legs and shoves the sack and the contents as best they could into the pants. There was a belt, so using, putting both legs around their neck, carrying the sack, but using the belt to make sure that the open waist part wasn't letting any sand out, and then very carefully walking with the contents of the sack that way and not looking inside as they were instructed. So walking around like that, and again, seeing a lot of other pilgrims, a lot of other travelers struggling with their sack, and just, I'm noticing a lot of different situations, because it's not just the pilgrims. There are other people who don't have sacks at all, and they're dressed differently, they behave differently. They're not antagonistic like the marauders were. They're headed in different directions than the pilgrims. Sometimes they engage with pilgrims, sometimes vice versa. I don't notice any food in this little story that comes up. It's all just kind of interactions. I'm just remembering that now. And some people are dressed the same way, and they're also not carrying sacks. They're not carrying sacks, but they're headed in the same direction as the pilgrims. So they seem to have the same goal, but they don't have the weight that the marauders are carrying. So it's very interesting. And one of these people walks up, the other pilgrims that is not carrying a heavy sack, comes up to the person and says, "Hey, are you okay? Because you're not wearing pants. Are you okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, the marauders, and my sack is inside my pants, and so this is what I'm doing." And they said, "Do you want to be carrying all of that?" And they said, "Well, yeah, I was told this is everything that I need, and told where to go." And they said, "But what is it that you're carrying?" And they said, "Oh, we don't look inside. We don't look in the sack." Why not? "Well, the guy who gave me everything that I needed, he told me so." "Okay, who was he?" "Well, I mean, I didn't really ask. Everyone was in line, and everyone else..." Wait for the vehicle. "Everyone was in line, and everyone else got a sack, and everybody seemed really confident. So this is just what we do. This is how we wait." And, the person who's, traveling alongside, taking their time to not get way ahead, not offering to help, because we just don't do that. Gently just kind of asking questions. And it didn't feel like an accusation. It didn't feel like the person I was following had a problem with the questions. And it didn't feel like the person I was following, it didn't feel like they thought they were on the same pilgrimage, I guess. So they just kind of tolerated each other. And I don't know if time has passed, but at some point the person says, "What if what was in the sack was everything that you needed and some extra?" And this kind of, it was a big question mark. The person I was following didn't know what to do with it. So said, "Well, what is it that you mean?" And the new person said, "Well, I can only really tell you my story." And so this next part is going to be the other person's story. The other person's story. They did the same thing. They arrived at the same waypoint, met the same man, picked up the same sack, and carried and struggled with their weight, just like everyone else had. But a different thing happened. They encountered someone who was dressed very differently and just sitting in a very peaceful place, offering support, whether just, come here and have a bit of rest where it is safe from marauders, and they enjoyed some time together. And the person was, again, dressed very differently and not doing what everyone else was doing. And so the second pilgrim that we're talking about asked them, so you're not doing what we do, you're not a pilgrim. And they said, I am a pilgrim, but I'm on a different part of the journey than you're at. And so that sparked a lot of ideas. And the second pilgrim asked this person, so what is it that you're trying to do? And the second pilgrim said, I want to tell you a secret that someone has never told you before, but I need to wait until you want to know what that is. And because you've asked, I will tell you. You are carrying everything you need, just like I did, but you have more than what you need. That confused the second pilgrim, so they inquired for more. And through, a series of conversations, the second pilgrim came to realize that what is in the sack is extremely valuable and extremely important to their journey, to their growth, to their understanding, to the path that they wanted to be on. But they were not told that they had more than they needed. And there was a struggle in the second pilgrim's mind to be able to validate the story. I will need to look in the sack, which I've been told not to do by someone that I don't know. I will need to do something that's different than every other pilgrim around me. And I don't know what that's going to do. So, after much thought, the pilgrim finally decided, I'm going to look. Opened their sack and poured out the contents. It indeed was filled with sand and a handful of jewels. Talking to this very well-dressed person, a pilgrim on a different part of the journey, said, oh my goodness, these jewels are just like the ones on your clothing and that you're wearing, around your head like a crown. Yeah, it was everything that I needed. And when I got to the waypoint, they helped me to create what I'm showing up as, what you see on me. I needed these things, and I didn't have the skill to, create what you see. I needed other people, but I needed to bring everything that was me to them. I didn't actually need to bring all the things that were extra, but I carried them along until someone showed me that I didn't need it anymore. And because you have asked me, I've shared that with you, and now you see it. But now you need to decide what you will do. Can you leave the sand behind and continue your pilgrimage with just the jewels? Will you continue the journey with everything that you need, that you've been carrying all along? Will you let go of the things you don't need? And in the second pilgrim story, that is what brought them to catch up with our first pilgrim. So in a completely different situation, like the first pilgrim is talking to another pilgrim who did not get to the waypoint, who does not have the proof of the things that is in the story. But the story stirred such interest in them. So I could wear pants again. So I won't have to carry all these things. But, carrying all of this made me really strong. Does that mean that I will become weak if I do what you ask? Does it mean that the people around me will judge me because we've traveled this long? People have seen me carrying my sack. If they see me traveling without it, will I be accepted into the little protection circles? There's a lot of questions in the first pilgrim's mind. What will they do? And that's where it ended for me. So I'm not sure what you think of it. I think it's very potent. I think it's today was the first time I had ever encountered anything like this, and I thought it was beautiful. So I'm leaning into sharing a little more of the spiritual side of me. I don't often do that because I come from a religious background, and I love them so much, and I love what I learned so much, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I just want to show up how I am, and one of those things is meditating. And as I meditate, things come to mind. Sometimes they mean something to me, and sometimes they don't. Thank you for letting me share this with you, even though it's kind of scary, and have a great day.